The school to prison pipeline. This term describes how students are pushed out of schools and into the criminal justice system. But how does this happen anyway? Well, the tale is as old as time. Let's learn about it.
Schools, disproportionate disciplinary action, and ill treatment towards Black students has been an issue across the entire United States since and even before the desegregation that began after Brown v. Board of Education. Schools' use of suspension, expulsion, and even arrests have affected Black students especially, and the implicit bias behind this is documented.
The educators are failing the students. As a mentor, as a guider, as a teacher, the student is being failed by their educator. A teacher may overlook like a disrespectful comment from like a white student, but like a Black student or like a Hispanic student may get suspended for like a similar disrespectful comment. They may engage in the same behavior, but the white student will get off more, or like they'll have like less of a punishment.
Students suspended or expelled are more likely to drop out and be arrested. Schools with officers on staff also have much higher rates of arrest and use of force by large margins. Mistrust between students and school systems is brewed because of relationships like these. These patterns are present in the Athens-Clarke County school system and set up students not only to end up in incarceration, but also to be ill-equipped for a job market that fights with automation and technology far more advanced than in previous generations.
Unfortunately, students of color aren't the only ones at risk of falling into this pipeline. Students with disabilities are more than twice as likely to receive an out-of-school suspension than students without disabilities. And they make up 12% of the overall student population, yet 55% of all students involved in a school-related arrest, 58% of all students placed in seclusion, and 75% of all students physically restrained at school.
Black and brown students are also overrepresented in special educations.
So how the pipeline begins is deeming the child disabled within the educational system. So that being labeled disabled would require the student to have below average reading and writing capabilities. And once they have been labeled disabled, they will be taken out of the normal classroom and then placed into a separate classroom with other children who have been labeled disabled or special needs. Now, all this information was found in a study on the National Library of Medicine's website. It was conducted by Hybl, Farkas, and Morgan, and they were examining who is placed in special education. So once the child has gone through the process of being placed in special education, the dropout rate is now 30%. 30 to 40% of students with disabilities who are white and African American are arrested after high school graduation, and over half of students with disabilities are unemployed 2 years after leaving school. And additionally, students who have been through the special needs courses throughout elementary and high school find it difficult to find jobs more than entry level, so they are constantly being cycled through low wage paying jobs. Okay, from the same study, we find that certain demographics or ethnic groups are overrepresented in the special needs classrooms. It is estimated that 60 to 80% of students identified as disabled come from low socioeconomic status or ethnic minority households. So this also raises the question if these teachers and administrators are culturally competent enough to recognize a child might not be disabled, but just might come from a different household or a different background. That an African American child is 2.4 times more likely to be identified as mentally retarded, or 1.5% more likely to be identified as emotionally disturbed as their non-African American peers. Again, the study emphasizes that disproportionate representation may be because of the teacher's judgment or lack thereof to contextual factors such as their environment. So the ACLU, or American Civil Liberties Union, provided a document on the school to prison pipeline and kind of highlighted some reasons why it persists. So there is a zero tolerance policy in many schools, which criminalizes minor infractions of school rules. So students of color are especially vulnerable to push out trends, and it says discriminatory application of discipline. Schools actually may encourage dropout rates in order to have a better test-based score nationally. So they would encourage students who have maybe disabilities or labeled special needs to drop out to make the school look better nationally in terms of test scores and grade point averages. So again, many of these children who are labeled special need and now filtered through the pipeline come from households of either abuse, neglect, poverty, and they would benefit from additional resources within the school. So, but instead they are being isolated, segregated within the schools, and not really shown any opportunities other than discipline or reprimandation. So that is also a reason why the pipeline persists. If you're telling a child that they are not as smart as the rest of their class, or they need to be put in a different classroom, their morale will slowly break over time, and they think that they are deserving of the entry paying jobs when they get out of high school, or they might turn to crime if they feel like they're not going to make an adequate living by working a normal 9-to-5 job. So all of these tests kind of examine the school to prison pipeline nationally, but to make it more localized, I recently found a Flagpole article while I'm doing research for my practicum, AADM, and there was a interview by a man named Jamie Scott. He claimed to have been arrested 54 times between the ages of 14 and 37. Within Athens, and that can only make me think that this man, 14 years old, you are a child, you're a freshman in high school, was put on track for the school to prison pipeline. Being arrested 54 times within the span of another 14 years is insane. And also this reflects the state and superior courts within Georgia, because it's saying that, this is again from the Flagpole article, that Black and brown people make up half of those sentenced to confinement in state court and 60% in superior court. Additionally, this was before the decriminalization of marijuana law passed. Black and brown people were arrested at higher rates than white people for the same crime regarding marijuana. So the racism and oppression that we find in the legal system and the criminal justice system has leaked over into the educational system at the detriment of these children.
Now that we have discussed the main causes of the school to prison pipeline, as well as the demographics of the students that are affected by it, what do we do? Let's get into it.
And who needs to change, I also put them into 3 groups. So I put them into the students, the teachers / educators, and then the school or the school system, or just like the general like higher level positions of like educators. For their role, they need to change their behaviors to trust the educators more, to learn how to cope in different and healthier ways regarding external or internal sources of stress. And then for the teachers and educators, they need to be more patient. They need to be more understanding, especially with students who have a lot on their plate. Teachers need to adapt to that. They need to understand what they can do and what they can't do, and go from there on how to help the student. They need to learn how to trust their students more, how to be adaptable and change to their students' needs and cater lessons towards them to help them and not to hinder them, basically. The third one is a school, just the general school, the school system, people who are more like higher level than the teachers. They need to understand that students have external and internal stressors that may be out of their control, and they need to cater to their needs. Like they need to understand that students don't just have school on their plate. They don't just worry about homework, they worry about other things as well. Many other things. And they need to be unbiased as possible for this program to even work.
Well, there you have it. That is the school to prison pipeline. What do you think? Let us know in the comments.